you for joining me today. In my last few shows, I've gone deep into what the elites are, and I wanted to stand this show to stand out because the biggest question in life is usually how did this happen? My work is simply about who and what are psychopaths and what is their need for control and how this evil intersects with society. Psychopaths have this hardwired need for control, but control actually is reaching into our daily lives through law, finance, institutions, and the elites coordinating it all. And why many of the outcomes we experience are designed, not accidental. I'm always saying that saying evil has to come packaged as help. They always have so many helpful things they're saying. Like right now, Trump is over there saying the people of Venezuela are going to be very happy. They're going to be glad we pulled this thug off the streets and we grabbed their oil because, well, democracy is on their way. Well, that's a pretty big lie. So this is all by design. The United States, they're now seizing oil tankers leaked to Venezuela, capturing or targeting foreign leaders. They just got Maduro and enforcing its will far beyond the U.S. borders. The question is not just where this leads, but how it was made possible in the very first place. It did not happen through chaos. It happened through rules and laws. The U.S. is a nation of laws. But actually, the USA is a corporation. We lost the war. We're still British. You'd think in all this time I'd have a snazzy British accent to share with you right now, but no, not today. But yeah, I posted the same article endlessly. I posted it again in case you need to catch up. The USA is a corporation. We lost the war. We are still British. In earlier work, I've shown how modern power does not primarily operate through speeches, elections, or public debate. It actually operates through legal frameworks, regulatory systems, trade rules, security doctrines, and institutional incentives written by and for a very narrow set of elites. The elites have their own gods, and systems they design reflect their intent on eugenics against the rest of us, destroy our DNA, divide and conquer. And all of these mechanisms these elites come up with, well, they shape markets, they constrain choices, they define what outcomes are considered acceptable, and they get to quietly determine who absorbs harm when things go wrong. When systems fail people, that failure is routinely described as a bug. In reality, it's often the point. Evil has to come packaged as help, or in this case, laws they cooked up themselves. This is not a story about whether one empire was good or another was bad. It's a story about how power functions, how responsibility is obscured, and how control adapts when older, more visible forms of domination become politically unsustainable. The British Empire, top of the morning to you, London, is often remembered as uniquely brutal. The United States is often described as an imperfect but fundamentally moral successor. That comparison misses the point. What follows is not a moral argument, it is a structural one. By the late 19th and early 20th century, the British Empire had reached a contradiction it could not resolve. It governed vast populations with minimal consent. It relied on racial hierarchy, extraction, and coercion. It increasingly required overt violence to maintain control. Examples of this include the famines in India, exasperated by export policies, brutal counterinsurgency campaigns like in Ireland, Kenya, Malaya, collective punishment, concentration camps, the Boer War, and martial law. This level of coercion became politically unsustainable in an era of mass media, nationalism, and global war fatigue. Britain did not lose its empire because it was insufficiently ruthless. It lost it because its form of ruthlessness became too visible and too expensive to maintain. The United States absorbed British imperial dominance after World War II, but with key operational differences. What stayed the same? Well, control over trade routes, finance, and resources. Strategic military bases across the globe stayed the same. Willingness to use extreme violence when deemed necessary stayed the same. They just did it in other countries and not in the USA. So, what changed? Indirect rule replaced direct colonial governance. Corporations, NGOs, and international institutions replaced governors. And as an outcome of that, violence became outsourced through proxy wars, legalized treaties and security assistance, sanitized technocratic language, economic models. When Britain ruled openly, the U.S. ruled through systems. So, why the U.S. evil is harder to see than the British evil? British imperial violence was visible, explicit, often unapologetic. American imperial violence is bureaucratic, fragmented, plausibly deniable. So instead of saying we control you because we can, the US model says, no, markets demand this, security requires this, the developments failed, institutions malfunction. The harm is real, but the agency is obscured. This is why the U.S. can plausibly claim moral superiority while producing comparable or greater destructive outcomes. Britain's empire was personal and territorial. America's empire is financial, currency, dominance, and debt, legal, trade law, arbitration, and sanctions, infrastructure, energy, data, and logistics, psychological, narrative control, and normalization. This makes the U.S. empire more resilient, less accountable, harder to revolt against directly. You cannot declare independence from an algorithm, a credit system, or a global supply chain. So, why did Britain lost its empire? Well, I think that they didn't lose the empire. They just wrote a few lies about the war. But according to them, Britain faced rising domestic opposition, bankruptcy after two world wars, inability to hide the violence. But the U.S. has so far avoided this fate by shifting costs offshore, financing conflict. Wait a second here. I'm having a few issues here today. Wait a second. Okay. Financializing conflict, keeping domestic populations insulated. Yeah, keep watching those football games. Yay, USA! Yay, USA! While the whole world is burning around all of us, turning force into abstraction. But the underlying contradiction remains. An empire that depends on coercion eventually faces moral, economic, or structural collapse. Britain's empire Britain's empire. Hold on a second here. So, in summary, here, Britain's empire collapsed because its violence was just too visible. The American empire persists because its violence is systematic, outsourced, and deniable. That distinction, not a difference in moral character, is what separates the two. This is why modern harm so often appears accidental, technical, or unavoidable. The violence did not disappear. It just changed form. Powers like the US and the UK learned that visibility was a liability. that accountability could be diluted, and that systems could do what armies once did quietly. So we all need to understand that this shift is essential. How control operates now, why resistance feels diffuse and exhausting, and why outcomes remain destructive even when no single hand appears to be pulling the trigger. That is a framework behind all of what I'm trying to explain to you. The same hand, the British hand, is running things right now today. It's exactly how it's all been working out according to their plan. So, this is the reality. I'm not saying that, oh, it's a done deal. They got us in the corner, buckle and run. I mean, that would be the words of a coward. Stand tall. Understand why you're here. I believe strongly this is a game board. We're all here to be tested and tried and all of that. We all came with a purpose. Many people don't remember their purpose. I think if I were you, I would be focused on what is your purpose. This is the final staging of the big final war between good and evil. Which side are you going to be on? How are you going to support what you said you came down here to do? You can't support it if you can't remember it. You remember better if you get sleep and sun and proper nutrition. So, with that, I'm over and out. Goodbye.